We just recently interviewed Kirsten Powers, who has a book from a left wing perspective, The Silencing How the Left is Killing Free Speech. You're living through being in the crosshairs of the radical left. Talk about what it feels like. Why are they attacking you? What's going on?
Now, only politically correct views can be expressed in the public square. Only people who follow certain prescribed ideology are able to address our colleges and universities. It's appalling that college students today don't get a broad perspective and hear civil discourse that presents different points of view. I was a university professor for 10 years, and I was in charge of presenting pro-con forums. By that, we simply meant we brought in people from two diverse perspectives, and they presented arguments to the student body. And the student body then responded with Q&A, and oftentimes they voted. I think it's really sad when we reach a point of culture where people cannot engage in conversation and exchange ideas knowing that you share different ideas. I've been in green rooms and been friendly and cordial to the person who was going to be on the other side with me. And I even had one lady turn to me and say, "Why are you being friendly with me?" And, I kind of did a double take. Well, it's the courteous thing to do. We are engaging in civil discourse. We're sharing manners. And, it's just as plain as that. It's good manners to be polite to people.
So, America is being transformed by people who abide by Alinsky tactics, the rules for radicals,
Yes.
and they anticipate your graciousness. So, what to do?
The Human Rights Campaign does not like for anybody to say something is biblical. And so when we say the Bible clearly says marriage is between a man and a woman, that strikes at the heart of their argument that anybody can get married. And that causes difficulties. There can be no safe space. That's one of the favorite phrases for someone who holds that point of view. And that, of course, strikes at religious liberty. That strikes at freedom of speech. And it is a strike against America, if you want to be really, really blunt, because this country was founded on the principles of free speech. It was founded on the principles of freedom of religion. And if you are suppressing the expression of firm religious convictions, you are stifling free speech. You are killing off democracy. You are saying that only one point of view can be articulated in the public square. We are quickly getting to the point that you have to keep your faith within your house, within your houses of worship, and not bring it into the public square. Recently, I read an article critical of me because I said that another country was being robbed of its opportunity to have its own culture. And it was a matter of cultural imperialism that people from the United States and the UN were coming in and saying they had to change their culture. And I said, these are biblical imperatives, these are cultural imperatives, which we must respect, something along that line. And that was taken, that one little quote. So I went back to see what the tone was and what the interview was like because, it sounded really awful in the context in which it was quoted. I went back and that was prefaced with a statement that while we don't hate anybody and we offer everybody else the freedom of their point of view, we believe.
You said that.
And I said that in this interview. And it was astounding to me that in the context of kindness, in the context of freedom of speech, civil discourse, this one statement was taken out as though that was a prescription for everybody and that view was being forced on everybody. And that clearly was not the intent of the article, and none of the tone of the article was conveyed. It was clearly a distortion. It was clearly couched in lies, to be very blunt about it. So it's very difficult to fight against that. But I think ultimately truth wins out.
So, what would you recommend to people who should have and want to have the courage of their convictions, but they're feeling intimidated? And you know what it feels like because you're living through this. What do you say to people to bolster their courage?
I think you have to be true to yourself, and you have to be true to your faith, and you have to speak out, because we have all read of instances in history where good people did not speak out. We've all heard the cliches about if you don't know history, you're going to repeat history. And I think it's a warning to us that we can't be silenced. Yes, we must be polite. Yes, we must be courteous. Yes, we must be kind. I don't know of anybody, and I know so many people who share my point of view. I don't know a single person who hates anybody. I don't know a single person who would be bigoted. I don't know a single person who would be deliberately cruel, much less violent, towards somebody else, regardless of what their point of view is. And so I think it's really important to make that very clear. When you hold strong feelings, when you are firm in your convictions and your beliefs, that does not mean that you hate anybody else. That means that you know who you are, and you know where your faith lies, and you live out your faith freely and openly, but you allow others that same privilege. And that's what our country is all about.
Okay, so when you think of the things you're working on, Hillary Clinton also worked on children and women and family policy. So, what's at the root of the ideological clash going on these most foundational issues, Janice?
I think one of the most pivotal transitions in this country happened in 1994 when Hillary Clinton spoke at the UN Conference on Women in Beijing. She said there, women's rights are human rights. And that was just a twist enough to catch on with the public. That became a mantra for the feminists. That became a mantra for the whole Clinton administration. And that became part of an agenda that was not really about human rights at all. It was about giving women preferences and a women's rights agenda that was slightly off track from what feminism had been up to that point. Suddenly it became all about quotas. And
Except it wasn't a human right on Islamic issues. Think of honor killing and think of the way women are treated over that. Why do we not hear their voices on this human right for women?
It's astounding. It really is astounding because so much of that was at the Beijing conference and in all the conferences on women's issues, and yet all the emphasis is not in that direction. None of the rhetoric is in that direction. It's all in the direction of these pet ideologies like quotas and abortion.
So what's
and
at the root?
Women's rights is the only human right that counts. And the women's rights as the small cadre of Planned Parenthood and other major women's quotes organizations consider it to be, even in terms of the groups that work toward getting women elected for office. They were the first ones to attack people like Sarah Palin, for instance. They were the first ones to attack Carly Fiorina and any other woman from the conservative perspective who rises to public stature.
So what's at the root, though, of if it's not really about women, since they pick and choose their women, it's not really about women's issues, they pick and choose which issues. What's at the root?
If you look at the evidence, it's all about promoting an agenda. And they believe very, very strongly that a woman cannot be her full self unless she has total control over her reproduction. She must have free access to birth control, and if that doesn't work, she must have free access to abortion. And all of those things are considered a human right. And it's just a short step then to silencing people who believe otherwise. I think it's a very sad commentary when our heroes for women turn out to be the women who help a woman get an abortion, who take a young girl without her parents' knowledge to get an abortion, who are advocating for free birth control for law school students, for people who clearly have the money to pay for their own birth control. But these are the people who are held up as your models. And when women who have raised families, who have been stalwarts in their community, are ridiculed, no, that's not what the early feminists fought for. Those early feminists, the ones who are the heroes in the books about feminism, they were godly women. They were women who led very balanced lives for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part they were. And they were looking for equality. And the really ironic thing about it is the women who were most important in advocating for women's elevation, for the human rights of women as opposed to women's rights or human rights, they were women who were following God's admonition that we are all created equal.
So where are you now? What's this World Congress of Families, and how does this relate to what we're talking about?
I started with the World Congress at the second Congress that was in Geneva, and I've been a plenary speaker at every Congress since then and have been very, very involved. And I was thrilled recently to be asked to be the executive director for World Congress 9, which will meet in Salt Lake City, October 27th through 30 this fall. It will be a wonderful event. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir will sing. We have the piano guys who will be entertaining. It's going to be a gathering of some of the best scholars. Archbishop Cordialoni will be there from San Francisco. We're talking with Metropolitan Hilarion. It's very strong likelihood that he will be there. The wonderful motivational speaker Nick Vujicic from Australia will be there. Nick is the young man who has no arms and legs, and he talks with young people about the importance of life at every stage and in every circumstance. So tremendously motivational. All of us can learn from Nick about how to cope with the difficulties in life. So it's a marvelous program. The thing that I find particularly exciting about this particular World Congress is that it will be the first time this has been in the United States. And it's kind of remarkable. Here we are, World Congress 9, and this is the first time in the United States. And at this particular time in history, in this particular time in the United States, I think it's very, very significant because it's an opportunity, I think, for people who are believers in the importance of the family here in the United States to gain courage, to find the information that they need, to stand up and be emboldened to speak out and defend what they know is essential for strong communities and a strong nation, and essential for the well-being of their children. The World Congress of Families has been a gathering of pro-family people around the world since 1997. The first one was in Prague. The latest one was in Geneva, 2013. These conferences are very positive events. They celebrate the family. They strengthen people who are working in family organizations, provide networking opportunities, and they also provide scholarship. It brings scholarship from various countries to the table so that people understand that the problems we face in America, for instance, are the same as problems that they're facing in Australia, that they're facing in Amsterdam, and so on. But I would invite your listeners to go to the website. It's WCF9, and that website will provide you with the kind of information and research that substantiates the problems that we're having.
From your perspective, what are the three most important issues that are facing families and children and women right now?
I started thinking along these lines back in the year 2000. I wrote a long research paper at that time on the well-being of women called Gaining Ground, and I looked at 8 different categories of women's well-being, and what I found was that in every single one of those categories, women were so much better off than they had been 100 years before. And this was 100 years of trends. And it was so impressive. Health, education, all those areas, women were so much better off. But they were lonely. Women were as unhappy as they had ever been in history. You look at that and you think, where have we gone wrong? What is wrong that you have women who are doing so well in every area that Hillary Clinton, for instance, said that women should be doing and reaching the potential that everybody said we should reach, and yet there was this aching loneliness. And I think it boils down to the fact that we don't have faith to guide us. We've taken religion out of the public square, and none of these other things fill that hole that is within inside us. And that leaves women longing for something, and they don't know what. And our culture says it's materialism. Our culture says it's success. You be a success financially, and you'll have all the happiness you could ever want. And we mislead our young women by saying to them, oh, you've got to have succeeded in your career. You've got to have reached certain financial goals before you can get married, before you can have a family, before you can do any of the things that used to be there. And then the other dimension of that I think is so tragic for today's young people is that they have not seen role models. They've not seen authentic faith lived out in front of them. They've not seen authentic commitment lived out in front of them. I'll never forget sitting in an airplane with a young man that I called Josh. I sat in my seat thinking, this is going to be a quiet flight because I'm beside this young man and he won't want to talk to a middle-aged woman. And so I settled down to read or whatever, and he turned to talk to me. And it turned out he was tremendously frustrated because his sister, who'd been living with her boyfriend for 5 years, got married to him and then a year later was divorced. And his parents were divorced. And he turned to me and he said, I don't believe in love anymore. And I took a deep breath and I said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, because love is tremendously important to me. I've been married for 50 years and I love my husband more now than I ever have before, and I find that really, really tragic. But you're not alone. And he said, no, I know I'm not. And it just crystallized for me that so many young people today don't believe in the institutions of our society because they've not seen it modeled. They've seen politicians who talk well, their rhetoric is perfect, and yet they don't live it. They've seen one person after another disappoint them in terms of their ethics and their values, in terms of their commitment to their marriages, in terms of how they live their lives. And those even closest to them have disappointed them and abandoned them. So you have a whole generation of young people who've not seen adults living the kind of life that they dream of having. And young people are still longing for those kinds of things. Every study you see says that. 80% of high school students, their prime goal is they want to get married and have children and have a happy family. That's, the ideal. And yet they're told, oh, lose your virginity as soon as possible. Get rid of that in a hurry. And they're told, oh, if it doesn't work out, just move on to somebody else. They're told, oh, cohabitation, that's great. You don't have to have a commitment. You want to test it out, make sure it works before you get married. And so they think that this is the way to find happiness. And they're so disillusioned when they find out differently.
So what would you say your life mission is right now?
To speak out on the issues that I think are so tremendously important for women, for children. I care very deeply about teenagers. I don't know why. Even when I was a teenager myself, I was very concerned about the girls who were ruining their lives by making mistakes at that early age that affected the rest of their lives. They weren't able to go to college. They weren't able to do the things that they were perfectly capable of doing and had the potential to succeed at. And for some reason, that just broke my heart even then. And it still is kind of the thing that really gets me at a gut level. I want to help young people navigate. And one of the tragedies I think of today is that our culture has taken away so many of the road signs. We don't have the kind of culture that says, this is the way you go. Here are the things that are important. Here are the things that are guaranteed to help you succeed in life. Instead, we have substituted that with signs that direct them, here's the road to happiness. And anybody who's lived any length of time at all knows that's not a road to happiness. That's a road to carrying all sorts of baggage. That's the road to heartbreak, to loneliness, to the kinds of things that none of us want for children and young people. So that's the driving force in my life. And I think our culture has forgotten so much of the things that are really, really important in life. We don't have the deep faith. We don't value in the public square commitment to unselfishness. So we have young people who have been told over and over again, go for what you want, and are surprised that we end up with a me generation. It follows. And yet we continue to tell young people, oh, do whatever you want to do. Sow your wild oats. There are no consequences. Well, yeah, there are consequences. And those traditional values are there for a reason. And they work. Not always and not perfectly for everybody. We've all known people wonderful people who've tripped up and made mistakes. And it's not a recipe like, it's not Santa Claus who's guiding our lives out there, but it is a recipe and a formula that works. These are principles that are values that have been tested by time.